Imagine a family excited for Christmas, gathered around the tree, laughing and enjoying the warmth of the holiday season. But what should have been a joyful night quickly turns into a nightmare. A black family is wrongfully arrested by police, and the reason racial profiling. But here's the twist: the father, unaware to the officers at first, is a well-known politician. What happens next will leave you speechless. In this video, we're diving deep into a shocking event that unfolded during a holiday celebration, showing how this family's peaceful evening was ripped apart by a system that failed them. But what truly makes this story stand out is the unexpected revelation that the father is a politician. This twist sets off a chain of events that not only exposes racial bias, but also triggers a massive public outcry. What followed: protests, media scrutiny, and demands for justice. We'll explore the details of the arrest, from the officers' harsh treatment to the family's struggle as they faced humiliation and injustice. But here's where it gets even more chilling. What happened when the cops found out who the father really was? Did they suddenly change their behavior? Did they face consequences for their actions? Stay tuned as we break down the lesser-known facts surrounding this incident. You'll learn how one family's Christmas was stolen by a broken system and how this story became a symbol for something much bigger. We'll also take a look at the impact it had on the community and the political fallout that followed. By the end of this video, you'll understand how this seemingly random incident sparked a nationwide conversation about racism, privilege, and justice. This isn't just a story about one family. It's about the power of raising your voice against injustice. Welcome to Craze TV, where we bring you real stories that matter. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of our latest content. The air was filled with the sweet scent of pine and the warm glow of Christmas lights. Outside, snowflakes drifted gently from the sky, covering the world in a soft blanket of white. Inside the house, laughter echoed through the rooms as the family gathered around the Christmas tree. The decorations sparkled under the soft glow of the lights, each ornament holding a memory. The children, their faces glowing with excitement, eagerly unwrapped gifts, while their parents exchanged knowing smiles, happy to witness their joy. It was the kind of evening where everything seemed perfect, a peaceful, joyful Christmas night that was meant to be full of love and family warmth. In the center of it all was Marcus, the father, a proud and dedicated politician. He had worked hard all year to serve his community, and tonight all he wanted was to relax with his loved ones. He was a man of strength, but also of compassion, the kind of person who would listen before speaking, always seeking to make the world a better place. His suit was replaced by a cozy sweater, the serious politician momentarily replaced by the joyful father. He exchanged jokes with his wife, smiled at his children, and made sure everyone had what they needed. His wife, Carla, was equally dedicated to her family. A teacher by profession, she had always encouraged her children to be kind, thoughtful, and strong in the face of adversity. That evening, she was the anchor of the family, organizing the dinner and keeping everyone engaged in cheerful conversation. With a warm smile and gentle laugh, she brought balance to the room, ensuring that the chaos of wrapping paper and excited chatter never overwhelmed their sense of togetherness. Then there were the children, Keisha and Elijah. Keisha, the older of the two, was 11, with bright eyes full of curiosity and wonder. She couldn't wait to show off the new book she had received as a gift that promised adventure and knowledge. Elijah, only 8, was the bundle of energy, running around, unable to sit still for too long. His laughter was infectious, and his enthusiasm for every little gift was boundless. Together, they were a picture of happiness. A family united, celebrating Christmas with joy, love, and the simple pleasure of being together. It was a night like any other, where everything seemed possible, and the world outside felt far away. But little did they know the night would soon take an unexpected and tragic turn. The night was still young when the sudden sound of sirens broke through the peaceful atmosphere. At first, it was distant, almost like an echo, but it quickly grew louder, disturbing the tranquility of the family's Christmas evening. Marcus, standing in the living room, noticed the flashing red and blue lights outside his window. His first instinct was confusion. He hadn't heard any commotion in the neighborhood, and everything seemed calm. What could this be about? Before he could make sense of the situation, there was a knock at the door. Carla, her face filled with worry, glanced at Marcus. The children, still immersed in their gifts, hadn't noticed the disturbance yet. Marcus walked over to the door and opened it, expecting to see someone asking for directions, or perhaps a neighbor in need of help. Instead, he was met by two uniformed police officers, their faces stern, their body language demanding. "We need to talk to you," one of the officers said firmly without any explanation. Marcus, now on alert, looked at Carla, his heart beginning to race. "Is there a problem, officer?" he asked calmly, trying to keep his composure. But the officers didn't offer any answers right away. Instead, they stepped forward, blocking the doorway, and insisted they needed to speak to him and his family immediately. Confused and uncertain, Marcus stepped back, motioning for the officers to enter. "What's going on?" he asked again, his voice filled with tension. The officers' responses were vague at best, accusing the family of being involved in some kind of suspicious activity. They mentioned reports of a possible disturbance nearby, though they didn't clarify exactly what had happened. They claimed they had received a call about a potential threat in the area and needed to check the situation. But what followed made it clear that this wasn't a random check, it was targeted. The way they spoke to Marcus and his family revealed a certain bias and an assumption that something was wrong simply because of their skin color. Despite Marcus's attempts to reason with the officers, they didn't back down. Instead, they became increasingly hostile. When Marcus asked to see the details of the call or the evidence that justified this action, one of the officers snapped, "We're just doing our job, sir. Now step aside." They didn't ask for permission to search or even offer an explanation. They just pushed forward, accusing the family of being involved in something they hadn't done. The air was thick with tension as Marcus tried to stay calm, his mind racing. This wasn't making sense. But what made matters worse was that the officers didn't seem to care who they were dealing with. They didn't know Marcus was a politician. They didn't recognize him, nor did they seem to care to ask any questions before escalating the situation. To them, he was just another black man, and his family was just another group of people they assumed might be trouble. As the officers continued to interrogate him and his wife, they completely ignored their attempts to clarify the situation. They didn't care that they were celebrating Christmas. They didn't care about the holiday spirit or the joy they were trying to embrace. The officers were only focused on pushing their agenda, and it was clear they had made up their minds before even walking through the door. The confusion in Marcus's mind grew into frustration. Why were they treating him like this? Why were they accusing his family of something without any clear reason? He had been calm, respectful, and cooperative, yet the officers were treating him as if he were the one breaking the law. He couldn't understand why his family, just trying to enjoy a peaceful evening together, was being subjected to this kind of treatment. Meanwhile, Carla stood by, her face pale, trying to protect their children, but she could feel the weight of the officers' harsh stares. She glanced at the kids who had stopped playing and were now watching the scene unfold with confusion and fear in their eyes. Keisha clung to her mother's side, and Elijah's small face was full of questions, not understanding why the officers were suddenly at their door. The tension was suffocating. The officers continued their harsh questioning, their eyes cold and unyielding as they demanded answers from Marcus. They didn't seem to care that it was Christmas night or that they were breaking apart a family celebration. They didn't see Marcus as a father or as a person. They only saw someone they assumed was guilty. The accusations kept coming, each one more bizarre than the last. At one point, one of the officers suggested that Marcus might be involved in a local robbery, even though there had been no reports of anything like that. It was all too much. Marcus felt the heat of frustration rising in his chest, but he kept his voice steady, trying to explain that they were just a family celebrating Christmas. But the officers were relentless, their questions growing sharper and more aggressive with each passing minute. It was as if they had already decided he was guilty, even though they had no proof. Carla, standing behind Marcus, was now visibly shaking her hand, gripping her daughter's shoulder as she tried to maintain some semblance of calm. The children stood frozen, unsure of what was happening, but sensing the growing danger in the air. The officers ignored their presence, treating them as if they were mere bystanders in an interrogation they had no right to be a part of. Everything shifted, however, when one of the officers glanced down at Marcus's driver's license, which he had handed over earlier. There was a moment of silence, a brief pause in the tense atmosphere. The officer's eyes narrowed as he looked at the name on the license. His demeanor changed almost instantly, the aggressive tone softening for just a moment. "Wait a minute, Marcus Daniels," the officer muttered under his breath, a flicker of recognition crossing his face. He glanced at his partner, who looked equally uncertain. Then a slow realization dawned on both officers. They were no longer just speaking to any black man. They were speaking to someone who held influence, someone with power. Marcus Daniels wasn't just a father or a random citizen. He was a respected politician in the community. The change in their behavior was immediate. The once harsh and accusatory officers were suddenly far more deferential, almost apologetic, as if they'd just realized they'd made a grave mistake. The questioning stopped. The tension in the air lifted, but only for the officers. For Marcus and his family, it was too late. The damage had already been done. The family, still reeling from the shock of being treated like criminals, could sense the officers' shift in attitude. The police had only shown respect when they realized who Marcus was: a politician. Before that, they had assumed him to be nothing more than a suspect, someone to be interrogated and controlled. As soon as the officers realized who Marcus was, everything changed. The stern expressions they had worn moments earlier softened, and their voices, once sharp and demanding, became almost too polite. They suddenly treated Marcus like a respected figure, a person worthy of dignity. The shift was jarring, almost immediate, as if they had flicked a switch. One officer cleared his throat, suddenly apologizing for the confusion, his tone now much more deferential. "Mr. Daniels, we didn't know you were well. You're a public figure," the officer said, his words stumbling slightly. His partner quickly nodded in agreement, as if trying to salvage the situation. "We apologize for the misunderstanding. This was an unfortunate situation, but the damage had already been done." The once accusatory police had now switched to an almost overly respectful stance. They no longer seemed interested in pressing the family further. Instead, they hurriedly backed away, as though they were eager to leave. The change in their behavior was so stark, it almost felt rehearsed, as if they had learned to be polite only when they realized they were dealing with someone of status. Marcus, still shaken by the turn of events, could hardly process this sudden shift in tone. Carla stood beside him, her mind racing, unable to grasp the hypocrisy in front of her. The officer's sudden politeness didn't erase the humiliation they had just inflicted on her family. What mattered was the treatment they had received moments before. No apology could undo the harm caused by their racial bias, the assumption that they were criminals simply because of their skin color. And while the officers tried to exit the scene with hurried apologies, they left the family with a deep sense of injustice. As news of the incident began to spread, the public response was swift and furious. Social media exploded with outrage as people began to share what had happened to Marcus and his family. Comments flooded in condemning the officers' actions and calling attention to the racial profiling that had clearly been at play. The fact that Marcus was a politician only added fuel to the fire, as it highlighted the way society often ignores or excuses such behavior unless it involves someone in power. People began demanding accountability, and the story quickly gained traction in the media. Headlines flashed across news stations, each one echoing the same message: Black family wrongfully arrested on Christmas, racial profiling exposed. The local community rallied around the Daniels family, organizing protests to call attention to the systemic racism that still plagued law enforcement. People from all walks of life took to the streets holding signs that read "Justice for the Daniels family" and "End racial profiling." The protests grew larger, gaining support from various activist groups who saw this incident as a prime example of the everyday struggles that Black families face. News outlets covered the growing movement, interviewing people who felt that the police's actions were a direct reflection of the larger racial inequalities in society. The story, fueled by anger and a desire for justice, became a rallying cry for those who had long been advocating for change. It was clear that what had started as a deeply personal violation for one family had quickly evolved into a much larger issue, a fight against racial injustice that resonated with many. In the days that followed the incident, the emotional toll on Marcus and his family was undeniable. The Christmas night that had started with laughter and joy now felt like a distant memory, replaced by a deep sense of violation and distress. Carla struggled with the overwhelming sense of helplessness, trying to console her children while dealing with the emotional weight of what had happened. Keisha and Elijah, both too young to fully understand, were deeply affected by the confusion and fear they had witnessed. Their innocent view of the world had been shattered in an instant, and for days afterward, they kept asking why the police had treated them that way. Marcus, on the other hand, was consumed by a mixture of anger and sorrow. As a politician, he had fought for years to bridge divides in the community and stand up for equality. But to experience such blatant racial profiling firsthand left him questioning everything. He spent hours reflecting on the event, feeling the sting of humiliation and the weight of responsibility to take action. His political career, which had been focused on improving the lives of those around him, now seemed inseparable from this painful chapter. The family's response was one of resilience. They leaned on each other for strength, even as they confronted the anger and sadness that came with knowing they had been treated unfairly. The public response was overwhelming. People across the country rallied around the Daniels family, offering messages of support and solidarity. Activists and community leaders spoke out, demanding justice for the family and calling for accountability from the officers involved. Social media was flooded with hashtags like #JusticeForDaniels and #EndRacial Profiling, sparking widespread conversations about police misconduct and systemic racism. The support grew not just locally, but nationally as the story gained traction in news outlets. As the pressure mounted, the police department was forced to take action. The officers involved in the incident were placed on administrative leave while an internal investigation was conducted. Public outcry over the officers' actions reached a fever pitch, and the department could no longer ignore the calls for justice. While the outcome of the investigation was not immediately clear, there was a growing expectation that there would be consequences for the officers' misconduct. The incident had exposed a deep flaw in law enforcement practices, and many believed that disciplinary measures were the only way to begin addressing the systemic issues that allowed such behavior to go unchecked. For Marcus, the aftermath of the arrest became a turning point in his political journey. He used the incident to fuel his advocacy for police reform and racial justice. Speaking out publicly, he called for a thorough investigation into the officers' conduct and demanded that the police department be held accountable. He also pushed for legislative changes aimed at addressing racial profiling, acknowledging that this wasn't just a personal tragedy, but a broader issue that needed to be confronted. Marcus took the pain of what had happened to his family and channeled it into a renewed commitment to fight for justice, knowing that his platform as a politician gave him the ability to make real change. His stance resonated with his supporters, who saw him not just as a politician, but as a man of integrity and resilience, willing to stand up for what was right despite the personal cost. This incident, though deeply painful for the Daniels family, serves as a powerful reminder of the harsh realities that many Black families face on a daily basis. It shines a glaring light on the ongoing issue of racial profiling, a problem that continues to plague communities across the nation. What happened to Marcus, Carla, and their children wasn't an isolated incident. It's part of a much larger pattern of systemic issues within law enforcement that need to be addressed. This event exposed the prejudice that still exists in our society and the way that race can determine how individuals are treated even during something as innocent as a Christmas celebration. The public outcry that followed shows the growing awareness of this injustice. It's a call to action for all of us to stand up against racial profiling, to demand accountability, and to work toward a future where no family has to endure this kind of treatment simply because of the color of their skin. Justice is not just about the legal consequences for the officers involved. It is about creating lasting change in how we see and treat each other as a society. Standing up against injustice is essential. Marcus and his family's courage to speak out sparked a wider conversation about race privilege and systemic bias. This moment serves as a reminder that we all have a role to play in demanding fairness and equality. Whether it's through advocating for change, supporting victims of injustice, or simply listening and learning from the experiences of others, we can all contribute to making the world a better place. Thank you for watching. If you found this video meaningful, please give it a like and make sure to subscribe to Craze TV so you don't miss out on more stories that matter. Together, we can continue to shed light on the issues that need our attention and keep pushing for a more just and equitable world.